Hey everyone, it's Corey and welcome to After Hours. Tonight we are going to be in episode 3 of the Block by Block series. Now if you're new here, the Block by Block series is these episodes that I'm taking you through piecing individual quilt blocks, so then you can take these skills and use them on a larger quilt. You can multiply those blocks, you can create your own sampler if you would like, but you always have this video to return to so you know how to create that block. But before we get started, please make sure you are subscribed to our channel. It's going to be right down at that bottom right hand corner. After you click on that subscribe button, click on the little bell that shows up so you can stay notified with all things going on here at Linda's. Tonight's episode of the Block by Block series is going to be the Churn Dash block. Now I love the Churn Dash block. It is a super classic, timeless block and it's so easy to put together. So let's go overhead and take a look at the block and how we are going to do it. So the Churn Dash block is basically put together in 3 different rows. And you've got your half square triangle pieces out on the corners, you've got your strip pieces, and then your center block. Tonight's block that we're making is going to be 12.5 inches unfinished, or 12 inches finished whenever it's put into an actual quilt. So let's start off by doing our half square triangle pieces. If you remember from episode 1, we have a handy dandy sheet from Quilters Select showing us how to do 8 half square triangle units at a time, what square size we need to start with, what to trim it to, and what the finished size will be. You can also find this link in the description below. It's a free download that you can get because this makes it so easy. So what we're doing for this size block is our finished size units should be 4 inches. So if I look on my chart, finished half square triangle is 4 inches. I'll trim them to 4.5, and I'm going to start with 2 10-inch squares. So I'm going to grab my 10-inch squares. Now tonight I'm using red and black like you see on the sampler. So I've got 2 10-inch squares right here. I've got my red and my black. So what I'm going to start off by doing is putting these right sides together, lining these up, and then I am going to grab my ruler and go at a diagonal across these. Now to mark this from point to point, I'm going to be using my 2-in-1 self-erase marker from Quilters Select. So I'm going to use the purple side on this and just mark that diagonal line from point to point. It's going to give us our first mark. A little harder to see on camera, but you'll definitely be able to see it when you are working. Now we go on this. No need to be afraid of this either. This is an air erase marker. They go away in about 24 to 48 hours. So if you're marking a bunch of these up, don't be afraid that they're going to disappear automatically on you. You can see that line a little bit better. But you're going to have those lines right there. And what we are going to do is head over to our sewing machine and we are going to stitch 1/4 inch on both sides of those lines, and that's going to give us our half square triangle units. Okay, so over here at our machine, we're going to stitch again, like I said, 1/4 inch away on either side of this line. So you can start on whichever side that you want to. So I'm going to start on this left side and do my stitch, backtrack just to tie it down, and then kind of keep hold of this fabric as you're working through just so it doesn't shift. That way you've got perfect points all the way around, because sometimes your fabric can get away from you easily. That's one side there, so we'll trim our threads, and then I'm just going to rotate this over and then do 1/4 inch on the other side of that line. Okay. So we've done one of our diagonal lines. Now we're going to repeat this same process on this other marked line. And this is what's going to give us those 8 at a time half square triangle units. Now for this block, we only need 4 of the half square triangle units. However, if you're doing this in bulk, It's good just to know this method so you can knock out a bunch of half square triangles at one time. And last one. Perfect. Okay, now that we've got those, let's head back over and trim this up. Okay, so now we're going to start by going ahead and trimming up these to create our 8 half square triangle units. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to start by doing a vertical line through the center. So what I'm going to do is line up my ruler right where these points are going to cut right through those seam lines, but then I also want to make sure it's nice and straight on the top and the bottom as well. Hold this in place and grab my rotary cutter and trim that one direction. Then I'm going to rotate this and trim again another vertical line. I do these one at a time just to make sure that I've got this right. You can stack them and do them more at a time if you would like, but I'm just a little extra cautious when it comes to my cutting. So again, right through the center here, trim, set those 2 off to the side, and then the same thing with our other side. Making sure everything's nice and straight, lining everything up, and then we're gonna go right through the center with a trim. Now that that's completed into these 4 individual pieces, now I'm going to rotate these on their 45-degree and cut right down that line that we marked originally. So I can go from point to point on this, and that should match up with that marked line that we did earlier. And cut right down that. And do this for this whole process. Now remember, this is going to yield you 8 of your half square triangle units, but we only need 4 for one of the blocks. So you can have more to crank out more blocks if you would like, or then you've got some half square triangle units to use for a future project. Here we are on our last one. Perfect. So then when we open these up, you can see we have our beautiful half square triangles. So I'm going to go ahead and press these. So when we are pressing them, we're going to go ahead and press towards the dark side or towards the black side on this one. So what I'm going to do is lay this down where the black fabric for me is sticking up. When I open it, I see my red. I'll grab my iron and then just press over. And that's going to then push that seam towards the dark side. So give us a nice little press there. And when I flip it over, you can see that you're seeing the full piece of the red, and that's pushed it over to the dark side. Now remember, we only need 4 for this one block, so go ahead and press all of those over. Grab our next one. And our next one. Perfect. Beautiful. Okay. So there are those 4. And let's go ahead and trim these up. Now for this block, remember, we need to trim it up based on our chart to 4.5 inches. So you're going to square that up to 4.5. If you have a 4.5 by 4.5 ruler, this works great. Or I like to use my Stripology ruler now for squaring up. So what I do is I have the Square It ruler. And I am going to find the 4.5 white square. And there is a dotted diagonal white line that goes at a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to line that line up where that 45-degree angle line goes right through the seam line that I've created, but then I also want to make sure that this 4.5 inch square is covering my whole entire unit that I've made. So it takes a little bit of maneuvering. Now if you've got a standard ruler, you can use that as well. You do not have to have one of these to do squaring up at all. Once I've got this in the place that I need it to be, I'll put that down, and then I'm going to grab my rotary cutter and travel down that 4.5 inch line on both sides. There's one, and my other 4.5 is right here. There's that one. And then when I pick this up, I can move any of the edges that I have, and I will rotate this. I'm going to line up the white diagonal with the white diagonal seam, and then my 4.5 on the block. And then we'll trim it up. And if I remove all the excess, now I've got a perfect 4.5 inch half square triangle unit. So I'm going to repeat that 3 more times. So that is our last cut for that. And now we have got 4 beautiful half square triangle units that are now squared up to the 4.5 inches that we need. And I'm going to lay this out so you can start to see how this is going to come together. So the next piece, which is pretty easy, you can use your square it ruler for that as well, is we need a 4.5 inch white square to go in the center here, which I've already cut that out. We've got that one right there. And then we are going to need 4 2.5 by 4.5 inch white strips. Those are going to sit here on the edges, like that. And then we need 4 of the black 2.5 by 4.5 inch. Right there. So now these aren't stitched together, but you can start to see the Churn Dash block coming together. So now what I'm going to do is I want to take these pieces over to the machine and chain piece them together. We're going to do our strips. So I'm just going to fold these right sides together. And then I lay them in the direction that I'll be sewing my 1/4 inch seam. That just helps me when I'm headed over to the machine. Lay those that way, this way, and then this way. So let's head over to the machine and stitch these together. So these are going to be a quick one. You can even chain piece these together just to make it really fast for you. So just line everything up, drop that in, and go for it. And if you've never done chain piecing before, all you're really doing is when you get to the end of this, just grabbing your next set and then lining that up right underneath your foot, so then it can just attach right in and keep on moving like a chain. Decreasing the amount of times you have to do your trims of your thread and keeping it all together. This is a great way to bulk get through a bunch of stuff, as long as you're making sure the direction is correct. What I mean by that is, as long as you're making sure you're stitching on the right side. We've all been there where sometimes you stitch on the wrong side and you don't notice it until the end. But that's going to be our 4 pieces that we need for this block. And then we can head back over to the cutting table and get everything pressed. All right, so we can go ahead and trim these pieces apart. And I'm just going to do this with my rotary cutter really quick, and I'm just trimming right on those threads. That way they come out. And we are going to press these to the dark side as well. So starting with the white on the bottom and the black on the top, grab my iron and then just press over and give that a nice good press. I love having my little project iron right here. This is the Aliso M3 Pro. It's even got a little headlight on it. It's good for darker fabrics, but it's nice just to have it right here next to my cutting station. I've got my wool mat off of the cutting mat. I don't have that on there because you don't want to send any heat through and warp your cutting mat, so always keep that in mind. But it's good just to have a nice little project one right here next to me. Once I've got that set, we can lay this out one more time to see. We're going to have all of the black rectangles coming in towards the center. Just like that. Now all we have to do is sew these together into their rows. So let's head over to the machine. So what I'm going to do is lay these out next to the machine just so I make sure that I've got the proper way that they're supposed to go. So that's my first layout for this top row. I'll set the rest of them to the side. And I'm going to put these right sides together. So we'll start this direction. And then we're going to do a 1/4 inch seam. Right there to the ends. Open that up. and then add in our other side, just making sure you have the direction the right way. Making sure those Churn Dash red pieces, for this instance for me, are pointing the right direction. Trim our threads, and there's our first row. So we'll do our next row. Now this is going to be the strips, the one solid square that we've got, and then the strips again. Laying it out just to make sure that we've got things in the right direction. And we will stitch these down their seams. Now there are much faster ways to do this in bulk, but again, I like to take you through the entire process of one block. That way you can then use these steps to replicate them to make more blocks at the end. There's that one, so that's the second part of the row, and then this is our third row. Again, let's set these out to make sure they're all going to be pointing the proper direction, and they are. Lay these together, and let's stitch our seams. Next one. Perfect. Oh, that shifted. Let's fix that. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so these are our 3 rows. I want to show you one thing about pressing and lining up these points to make sure they're super accurate. So let's go to the cutting table one more time, and then we'll come back to sew the block together. All right, so let's go ahead and press these together. Now it's very important to remember, in order to have everything nest properly, you want to make sure your pressing directions are going the opposite ways on each row. That way things lay together nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this first top row of our Churn Dash and take this to my pressing surface, and I'm going to have majority of this block in my left hand in that one half square triangle unit here on the right hand side. I'm going to grab my iron and press over. This is going towards that black and white strip, giving that a good press. Moving this over. 2 pieces now are on the ironing surface, 1 piece is here in my left hand, and press over. Having all of these seams go one direction. Just like that. Now the next one, the seams have to go the opposite direction. So you know what I like to do when I've done this before, and if you're new here, I like to rotate it so I'm always going to the right, but when I put it back together, it's going to be facing the right direction. So this is how the row is supposed to look. Now this is a non-directional row as well, so it wouldn't matter which way I go, but let's just go ahead and get that good habit that if this is the row, I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees, hold this left hand, or hold this side in my left hand, and then press over. Move this over and press. Okay. Now we did rotate that 180. We're going to rotate it back, and now it's going to have those seams going in opposite directions. Okay. Last but not least is this third row. So we'll take this one, press over, shift, and press over. Now each one of these has their seams going the opposite way, and it's going to allow them to nest beautifully in those points. So let's head over to the machine and get that done. Okay, last time here at the machine. So we've got our 3 rows, rows 1, 2, and 3. We're going to start with 1 and 2 for this block. And I'm going to put these right sides together, and I want to nest these seams that we just got done pressing together so they create a beautiful point. Now, you guys know my secret weapon for creating perfect points when piecing is the Roxanne glue Base-It. So what I'm going to do is turn this to where I have access to put this needle in that section. And I'm going to grab a little bit of a daub of glue and just put that right on those points where I need them to intersect perfectly. And then I'll grab my rows and put my seams together and just nest those in so beautifully where they sit perfect in those sections. Now I want to make sure everything's nice and lined up, and then I'm going to grab and just press and hold with both hands. And that temporary hold is going to lock that glue in. That is a water-soluble glue, so once it washes, it's all gone, no issues there. But there's no shifting, no shrinkage or anything like that when I am piecing, and that keeps those points perfect. And just like that, it's locked together where it needs to be. So then I will line this up, 1/4 inch seam, and stitch. That glue's not going to gum up your needle or harm your machine at all in any way, so don't let that worry you. You can just stitch right through it without a problem, which makes it so nice and so perfect. Okay. And when we open that up, perfect points. So good, okay? So that was row 1 and 2, so now we need to match row 2 and 3 together. So same thing with my glue. Come in right where I need that intersection point to be. And a little bit goes a long way. You don't have to put a ton of glue in here. Match those up. Make sure that sits in and nests really nicely. And then press and hold with your fingers. Give it 5 or 6 seconds just so it locks in together, fuses that temporarily. Perfect. And then we are going to make sure that everything lines up nicely for these. And stitch. As we're going, almost there. Perfect. And then we open this one up and we have perfect points there as well. So let's go over, press this out, and then we will have our finished block. And here it is, looking so good, but it does need a nice press. You can see it's kind of sitting all over the place. So what I want to do here is go ahead and press this in a general direction. Now remember, if we were wanting to make a bunch of these and have them go row by row by row, make sure that you're having your seams being pressed in the correct direction, so when you place them together, they'll nest properly. So just keep that in mind, that you're pressing one direction or the other to make sure that you're having that proper nesting. So I'm going to press this down. It's a good press. If you want to take this to your larger ironing board and do that with a bigger iron, you definitely can. But I'm in a little bit of a tight space, so my project iron is perfect for that. But you can see how nice and flat this is becoming. I'm going to go over this. So good. Alrighty guys, and there we have it. There's our churn dash block. So you can easily create beautiful churn dash blocks with these simple tips. Well, thank you all so much for joining me tonight as we took a look at the all classic, beautiful churn dash block. Don't forget, you can get your 8 at a time half square triangle instructions provided by Quilters Select. In the description below, there's a link. You can click on that and it is a free PDF download. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.